Welcome everybody, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer van Dijk and I'm here in the representation of the Laughing Leopards International Consultancy Firm. We consist of a team of 6 experts, as you see here, and the Department of Water Affairs of South Africa has made a call for tender to invite companies and consultancies to give advice on sustainable watershed management. So we designed some strategies for them, and in this presentation we will tell you how this goes. Okay, the content of our presentation, this hourglass refers to the timeline, our objectives being short, medium and long, but also on the structure. We will first explain the Baviaanskloof catchment in more general terms. Later on we will focus on trend analysis and scenarios, so much more into detail. In the end we'll come back to an overview showing the strategies and the outcomes and conclusions in general terms again. Good, here we see some maps of the Baviaanskloof, this region here in South Africa. It's located between 2 mountain ranges. The climatic conditions are pretty harsh on precipitation, as you can also see here in this rainfall diagram. The evapotranspiration exceeds the precipitation, so naturally speaking there is already a water deficit. This also further exacerbates the water scarcity that is encountered here in the region. So this main issue of water scarcity has also impacts on the people, the planet, profit, but also the way policies are being designed to overcome this issue. On this part we will show you how we come to these ideas, what we think is important on sustainable watershed management, the principles, and how this relates back to environment, society, and all these things. So have a look. We grouped these ideas into 4 topics, the 4 P's, so to say. Have a look how we brainstorm these ideas. So you see within the group work, we build up these ideas until in the end we come, you see that it's a kind of a house. This is to say that the strategy we developed is as solid as a house. We incorporate different aspects of sustainability, policy, stakeholders interactions, economic aspects, environment, and integration of all of this to ensure that the impact will be much desirable and successful. Okay, a problem statement is very important to analyze what is going on and how we are going to tackle the issue. We see that currently there is an irregular water availability in the watershed, related back to the rainfall diagram. That leads to water scarcity. Also, allocation conflicts occur between domestic use, commercial use, different water users. And the different trends will also increase the pressure on water resources. That we will explain later on. So as we analyzed, currently water is not available to the potential of all the water uses and purposes. So the environment needs to have its share, but also economic sectors to develop the region, and of course to sustain the livelihoods of people involved. Welcome. The ideas that we showed you before in the stop motion movie also refer back to the vision. We have a clear vision in mind that we want to accomplish by 2030. In that year we will see that the Baviaanskloof has sufficient water to develop the activities for people, the needs of the environment, but also for economic development. Conflicts on water. Okay, let's go on. conflicts on water have been minimalized by negotiation and so on. But above all, with all these strategies together, there will be a forward momentum which is going to be generated towards a sustainable future. This first ball here represents the strategy of the laughing leopards, which gives energy and strategies on every P that also has an effect on sustainability in the watershed. In turn again, the sustainable watershed will again interact with all the other P's. So there's a continuous interaction going on. In this part we will come to the objectives. Our team has determined short-term and long-term objectives. After every term we will have space for evaluation, where we will see if the objectives have been accomplished. Here on the right column you will see a list of indicators for every objective. For example, if we want to say we have to increase the water availability for the people living there, one specific target is that we want to have at least 25 liters per person per day available for the people there. So that is one measure to assess if it has been achieved, and so for all the others. During the trend analysis, we identified these trends as going on in the watershed, in the Baviaanskloof. Of course, every trend has a different degree of impact that we will show you in a matrix. And here we will actually point out how we did it. We made on one part the degree of impact related to water scarcity in broad terms, and on the right side the uncertainty if the impact is going to be or have positive or negative impacts. This way we grouped the whole list of trends until we come in this box that is important to show the extreme cases. So if we have, for example, a graphic, we identify the extreme scenarios and points to assure that all the other trends and situations will fall in between. So setting this extreme or limit boundary, we'll know that these three trends will have the biggest impact. But nevertheless, climate change is very complex to understand, and also strategies cannot directly influence this. Therefore we removed this trend, and we will from now on focus on the increase in tourism and the implementation of the National Water Act. Here again we will see the Newton cradles for every scenario. On the y-axis we have the tourism, whether or not it has positive effects or negative on water scarcity, and here the success of the National Water Act being implemented. So for every scenario we'll see the influence of the policy and the tourism related to the 4 P's. On the left column we will show the positive impacts and the negatives. So in the next table, one more, you will see how this, what are the results for every scenario. 4 scenarios in total, which we will go into explain later on in some graphics more precisely. In this part, we see that policies and institutions are crucial for implementing a strategy. It's the framework. We know that integrated catchment management is very important to assure sustainability and make sure that everything is being put together. One concrete example of something we want to implement is the creation of a new institution called the Baviaanskloof Catchment Board. They will be the ones to make sure that legislation will be integrated, to monitor the implementations, but also mediate between stakeholder conflicts and so on. And one particular measure and intervention is water licensing. This can be one of the many responsibilities of a catchment board to ensure that water users register, they will get a permit, and by this means they also have better access to water. Then the second part, my colleague Damian will explain more details about these interventions.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Alright, so next to the changes in institutions and policies, we have here the other interventions that we have identified. As you can see, we used a column here to express how much money we think each intervention will cost, when the effect of the intervention will take place in the short, mid-term or long-term, in which scenarios that Jennifer has spoken about these interventions will be successful, and how each intervention will have how much of an effect each intervention will have on each P. Looking especially at the success in the scenarios here, these three with the green bars around them, we think they will be could be successfully implemented in all four of the scenarios. So these interventions, we call them the no regret interventions, because whatever happens in the future, whichever scenario plays out, these interventions will be successful. Right, so the time frame for implementation. At the start we should do a pre-assessment, that is to see where each intervention should take place, how we should make, at what places we should build the sand storage dams, etc. Then in the short term, the institutional changes will be implemented immediately, because the Wageningen Catchment Board, which was mentioned before, will have a role in implementing all the rest of the physical strategies. Here again are the three interventions that we think of as no regret interventions. After that, after the short term is completed, we will evaluate and adapt to what scenario is more likely to continue, what scenario is going to be more active, so to say, and then continue with the strategies that are left over, like these scenarios, and then do it again in a really cyclical planning way, implementing these strategies, these interventions. Yeah. So this is the risk analysis for the institutional interventions. The integrated catchment management mentioned here, the organization will be the new Wageningen Catchment Board. But the risks are, it's very dependent on proper implementation of the National Water Act. So as you'll see later on, one of the axes was if the National Water Act gets implemented or not. This is highly dependent on that. So that's a big risk. And then of course there are the effects of the intervention. The same for alternative jobs to agriculture, in which organizations are responsible for implementation. The risks are listed here. We think that there might not be sufficient alternative jobs, profitable jobs available to agriculture or to the things that are used now. Then water licensing, again, is the same deal. Yeah. These, we have split up the intervention of water harvesting in roof water harvesting and in-field water harvesting, because the implementation is very different. In-field water harvesting is where the farmer in their field manages or catches the runoff water, and roof water harvesting is where you catch rainwater from a roof and use it for household purposes. The organizations are again listed. And the risks for roof water harvesting, these come from, for example, WOCAT. We used WOCAT here to look at the previous projects. Costly building materials and installation, and it's very dependent on rainfall. For roof water harvesting, water quality and maintenance are key issues here. For in-field water harvesting, it's very labor intensive to maintain. It's very dependent on rainfall. Okay, And sand storage dams, it's the exact same thing. Extreme physical events like major floods could reduce the lifetime of each sand storage dam. This is Bob the builder. He has built a rainwater harvesting tank. And this is a prime project, this is a major example of what we think the Wageningen Catchment Board could implement. And at the same time, when they provide these at very low cost, these tanks, they could also do water licensing and combine the other interventions that we mentioned. Yep. Right, so now the next slide is going to be a bit full of information, stuff and text, so I want to again stress what I'm going to show you now. This is us, the living lands.
No.
This is the laughing leopards, and with our interventions we're going to move the 3 P's, but we cannot say directly, we cannot quantify how much we're going to move policy. So I'll focus on the first 3 P's. Yes, continue please. This is the graph for scenario 1. I'll quickly explain it because I don't have much time left. On the y-axis there's the change in the components of sustainability. So how much each component changes throughout the time on the x-axis. We have identified the terms here, short-term, mid-term, long-term. And in the top you'll see the interventions mentioned that we think we could do in scenario 1 in this case. The terms when the interventions will have an effect, short, mid and long, these are colored accordingly. So if you do an intervention here, especially these 3, the effect will be visible here. Yes, Jennifer, please. The baseline for the planet P here is influenced only by the scenario. No interventions are used. This is purely the scenario, and because we identified that tourism will have a positive effect on water availability and the NWA is implemented, the baseline for planet goes up in a kind of straight fashion. But now, this is the most important one. The difference here, this area, is the potential effect of the sum of all interventions. So this gives an indication of, in scenario 1, with these interventions we have identified, how each P will move up or down in the beginning for people, for example. Yes, next time. These are all the 4 scenarios, back again, the same as the table Jennifer showed you. I don't have much time left, so I'll only show here what happens here. In scenario 3, there's no National Water Act, and tourism is going to have a detrimental effect on water availability, so we're talking mass tourism here. In the beginning, the profit will primarily go up, and then it goes down again because it's not done in a sustainable way. You also see that because we do the cyclical planning, there have to be new interventions, so the interventions we have identified already need to be adapted to this scenario, to scenario 3 if this happens. But for most of the other scenarios, most of the interventions will be possible to do. Okay? So to conclude, why should you hire the Laughing Leopards consultancy firm? Well, we think that we can deliver immediate success through our no-regret interventions, but still maintain flexibility on the longer term because we use scenarios, we do cyclical planning, and we evaluate every time after a period. We look very closely to alignment for policy and institutional changes, and we want to involve stakeholders as much as we can. For that we have set up the Wageningen Catchment Board. And we say that we have the most comprehensive strategy through using the PPP framework. So, in short, to overcome, yeah, okay, let's see, you have to go. If you want to take a look at our planning process, we've got our logbook with us today. It's a pretty nice document that documents the way we worked. Yeah. So are there any questions? And thank you for your time.